All right, well,
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
whatever time you're watching this, I hope it's a good time. We're going to change the format up a little bit, as you can tell. The PowerPoint was nice, so we've just moved it so that way it's more interactive now. Welcome to Coop and Hatch Podcast number 11.
11.
No, I read this thing that said if you get past number 7, that you're pretty much doing it for the rest of your life.
Cool.
Yeah, now you're stuck.
Hopefully it's just more than you and I watching.
That would be nice. So we're going to talk about Chevys today, actually. Or the Chevrolet. The bow tie, one might say.
Yes.
Bing!
It was my favorite car when I was young because you could get them so cheap and build them so cheap.
Oh, yeah. If we're comparing them to how cars are today, the Evo would definitely be a Mustang, for sure. Like, the Mustang was definitely the one people were like, oh, I need that car, but it took a lot of money to get that car to where it should be.
Yeah, you could pick up a Chevy and build the motor.
I mean, we talked about what you did.
Yeah.
That shows it right there.
You could easily have a fairly quick car for $1,000-$1,500 dumped into the motor.
Yep.
Obviously,
getting more into Dodges and Mustangs, though.
People could spend a lot more on their motors. You know, if you port polish.
Yeah, but that's all getting into detail stuff. We're just comparing here. If you're comparing build cost, an Evo and a Mustang would be equivalent. A Subaru and a Chevy would be the same. And then, I guess who would be Dodge? Audi?
Yeah,
Audi.
Audi or BMW.
Yeah.
So, price-wise, from my perspective growing up, Chevy was the cheapest, then Ford, and then Chrysler, Dodge. Chrysler, Dodge always seemed to be
up there,
more expensive, but they were also probably more bulletproof.
A little bit more durable,
Yeah.
I might say.
Yeah.
Look at how many people are still LS swapping everything. So there's a reason they're that good and that cheap. Like, it's a give and take. Yes, an LS can take a ton of power. Yes, it's gonna blow up. Yes, you can fix it for $6. Let's talk about one of an earlier special model called the Yeoman Station Wagon. This thing's freaking cool. It's a 2-door that fits 6 people. Let's give a visual for this. This is a wagon, so this means this is 3 rows.
Yeah, 6 people.
6 people, 2 per row. That means 2 people had to crawl over one bench seat and then another bench seat, or go in through the hatch and crawl in that way.
Well, it may have also been 3 and 3.
I like the visual of
crawling over.
Double crawl. I think that's funny.
Yeah.
I had to do that in Suburban. That sucked. So this thing, it came with a straight 6. There's 2 straight 6 options and there's 2 V8 options all the way up to the 5.7. So, just like any other wagon, really versatile. Tons of different options to fit what the American family needs.
Yeah, I read that they put the first Chevy big block into this. Which
I wouldn't be surprised. This thing's massive.
It was a 348, if I remember correctly, which isn't really...
that's not a big block now, but that's a big motor back then.
Yeah, in the 50s.
Yeah, in 58. And then there is 16,590 produced, and this is what it looks like. They're kind of got that Bel Air feel to them, but just adding a little bit of steeziness to it.
Yeah, super cool looking car.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll give you the next one. This one's kind of cool.
I loved this car when it came out. I was always big into the IMSA look. You know, the
IMSA's a type of race.
Yeah, road race. The IMSA cars were always short, squatty with big fat fenders.
Kind of square fenders, not like the new school style where they like kind of like this or like this. It definitely was it's just a lot of box.
A big box. Some cars to speak of, the Audi Quattro.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Big boxy.
Bruce McLaren had a massive influence on IMSA, so that's a really good one to look into as well, is the history of Bruce.
And
he died way too young.
And the BMW.
Oh, the M? Yeah.
The big boxy flares, if you're familiar with those cars.
Yeah.
So this is the 77 Mazda Mirage.
Mazda?
Monza.
There you go.
Sorry. Beep, blooper. 77 Monza Mirage. Not the Spider. The Spider was also a cool Monza.
Yeah. The Spider literally had a massive spider printed on the hood.
So the Monza was built, it's a little bit bigger than the Vega, but it was back in when there was serious gas crisis going on in the United States. So they built it for gas mileage. Here's the photo of it.
I love how, like, that style of art is so good. It reminds me of Initial D, the anime about the downhill racing in Japan I showed you. It has that same vibe to it.
Yeah, they almost used a rotary engine. We'll get into that a little later. Chevy was experimenting with rotary. The engine bay was big enough for a small V8, and some of them did come with the V8.
From the factory, they stuffed a V8 into a car that was supposed to get good gas mileage.
Yeah.
I love Chevy.
So you could get it with a 4-cylinder, 2.3, 6-cylinder.
It was turbo too, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, you can get little turbo. I mean, it's definitely not equivalent to how a turbo works now. Back then, it was this crazy looking fan that came off a plane on this thing,
stick it on,
and just have a boost controller manually and just crank her up. Like, no.
So there was 457 of them built, and there's 30 still to be known in existence today.
And they all have the same paint job.
Yeah, they all look the exact same.
Yep.
So if you see one of these, appreciate what it is.
Definitely.
It's one of 30, a Survivor. You'll see them occasionally at car shows.
Yeah, it's this generation of vehicles. I mean, even Dodge with the Daytona, that was weird too, and Shelby put his touch on that, which I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this might be one of Chevy's greatest cars ever. It's by far Chevy's most versatile car, easily.
Versatile?
Yes. This platform is the most versatile platform they've ever made. So this is the 65 Yenco Stinger Corvair. I'm just going to show you. Yes, this thing does not have a grill because the motor is in the back, which is cool. That's the 60s thing to do. I mean, Volkswagen ran that style for years. Porsche's done it. It's not an uncommon thing, but the thing that this also had in common with those was it was also a flat motor. It was a pancake. And air-cooled. So this basically was the US version of a Bug.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which is kind of cool. And the thing was, they weren't terrible. They were, but they weren't. Because these were the perfect, mid-engine, and it's lightweight.
Rear engine.
Yeah, rear. But still, that's all you're missing is a better motor, which people fixed quite easily by throwing a V8 in it. So they had this was essentially what V8 swapped was what the Corvette was supposed to be.
Yeah, mid-engine.
Yeah.
Because there was a kit to build this in a mid-engine. It would flip the transaxle and put a small block on the front side. So right behind your seats, a buddy of mine built one of these.
Yeah, these things are so sick.
The seats were a one-piece fiberglass kind of engine cover. Very uncomfortable, not a lot of cushion. And to ride in it was seriously scary because the motor was like right here. So, if something came apart, it was just coming through that fiberglass.
You're telling me you don't want a piston in your rib cage?
No, a piston or a fan belt or any engine part.
You need to figure out the definition of fun.
Yeah, getting hit with motor parts wouldn't be fun. No, but it was a crazy car.
Yeah, and especially on a Yenco edition, because they went up to a... did they have a flat 4 or a flat 6 from the factory?
Some friends of ours had one of these in a dune buggy, and it was the 6.
So
I'm pretty sure they were all flat sixes.
that would make sense, and I'm pretty sure what he did is he tuned it up to 220 horsepower, which 60s is pretty good from a flat six that no one knows how it actually works. Unless you made it, everyone's like, this thing is not a motor.
Yeah, a lot of people that were building buggies and things would want the Corvair because of the six.
Yeah, which makes sense, especially when the bug motors, I mean, a big bug motor was a 2100cc. You can buy a motorcycle with a bigger motor now.
Yeah.
So go up to a flat six, that displacement's way higher, and I'm sure the rev limiter is higher as well. So it just kind of makes more sense in the dune buggy sense. So
if you're not familiar, Yenco was a guy that owned a dealership, I believe, in Pennsylvania. Yeah. And he would just get cars in and then soup them up.
He kind of did what Shelby did, but like not on as big of a scale. Yeah, it was just really exclusive cars that only sold through his dealership.
Yeah, so his mechanics were building them versus a
Yeah, so at first what they would do is they'd get a car and they would modify it themselves, but then the Copo, we're going to talk about the Copo program with Chevy.
That's completely different.
A lot. Well, in this car it's not, because they helped build some of the first ones. And so the Yenco and Copo have worked together, so you could technically, it's probably not badged like this, but if it's a Yenco car that's built by Copo, you could have a Yenco Copo car, which would be insane. Would make sense
because Copo was a factory program.
Yeah, it was kind of like equivalent to the STI program for Subaru, or
the M program, or the
AMG program. So it's all like, this is just not ran strictly, or the Copo is. Yenco is more like Shelby.
Yeah, so they would take Copo cars and then add to them.
Yeah, and so I actually love Yenco. My dream car is a Yenco Camaro. But after seeing this list, the Yenco Camaro is amazing. It's iconic, but I may be switching over back to a Vega. Yeah, because you guys are going to see something here that's spicy. That's the Yenco Corvair. I think the reason I say the Corvair is the most versatile platform, we will also be talking about here in a second. So, well, here is a Copo car we were telling you about.
So, 68 Nova SS. Copo stands for Central Order Processing Office.
Okay, let's talk about name choice, Chevy. One, Copo is that is a great name. What is going on with the actual title, though?
Central Order Processing.
This sounds exactly like a program that isn't supposed to exist inside of a company. So they just made up some random office somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's that dealer over there."
So we'll talk about another Copo car in a little bit, but if you knew the part numbers of cars available through the Copo office, you could custom
order any car essentially if you knew what you were doing.
And just add these numbers to it.
Yeah, we'll show you an example of that. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, so
that'd be like ordering a Hellcat and having a Charger front end on it. If you know the coding and stuff, obviously that would never work. But that is the type of stuff that you would able to do back in the day, because the cars were all cars were like Legos back in the day. Every part just moved from part to part, or car to car.
And I don't know back in the 60s or 70s if they limited the number of cars. I think you could.
I don't know. They do now.
I think you could just go to the dealership and say, okay, I want this part number, this part number on this car. And it would be ordered through Copo.
Yeah, so there's some form of Copo cars that literally could be one-offs, or they could be 100 of. It's a really weird, cool system.
Yeah, so the Nova, which is super sweet looking.
The Nova is where does it line up with the Camaro? It's like
it's big brother.
Yeah, and then it's the little brother of the Chevelle.
Right.
So kind of shows you. It's like it would be like a new Charger.
Yeah, exactly. because when they came out, like the one I had, the 64, it was just a little square body, about the same size as the Camaro. But then as they went into the new generations, they got a little bit bigger.
Yeah, they started making them a little bit more diverse and a little bit more specific.
Doors.
Yeah.
4 doors and wagons as well.
A little bit more commuter, if you will.
So this is made at the request of the dealership.
This is copy.
Copo built 500 of this particular Nova. Came in 4 colors. They were made in 69 as well, so you could get a 69.
Or a 68. That's pretty cool.
You'll
see a lot of that, actually. There's a lot of just 2 years.
Yeah, there was a retired race car driver that took them and shoved 427s in a couple of them.
What the heck?
There's
Okay.
three of those known to be in existence. And I just love how simple and clean. I mean,
Yeah. Can you imagine thinking with a 427 in it, though?
nothing fancy with the wheels, just pure muscle race.
If I remember right, that the race car driver actually raced for Chevy. And so he kind of knew the cars intimately. And so for him, the 427, I'm sure, was easy to get because of his connections. And then he already knew everything about the car. So he's like, boop, boop. Like, that's crazy. Yeah, you're right. It has a really good old school pro stock vibe to it.
And most Copo cars were built for racing.
Yeah.
Drag racing, the NHRA.
NHRA, yes.
National Hot Rod Association.
Yeah, but they've built other cars for other reasons, like they've gone into GT racing and stuff like that, and then they've also made just random cars because they could. So,
speaking of random,
this car is the predecessor to that Yenco Corvair, and I love this thing. I had this car, different front end though, and now that I know there's a Yenco one, I'm a hunt a lot. This is now a debate between this and the Maverick GT. Like that.
Well, this is going to be way more expensive.
Yeah, it sure will. They made them in 71 and 72. There's 200 of them made each year. They were turbocharged, which is kind of cool, especially for the 60s, but again, not even close to how turbos work now.
70s.
That's what I meant. 70s. And there are only 50 of the wagons, or as they call them, Camembacks, I believe. Yeah. It's spelled weird. Okay, look at this thing. This looks like a Doctor Who wagon, but then Chevy's like, let's make it American as well. And then this is what pops out. Like, this is fantastic. This is a wagon that's a 2-door. This is phenomenal. And so, going back to the Yeoman, it most likely the front seats would come down. I could see in the Yeoman if it didn't though, because bench seats. Whereas the Vega had 2 individual bucket seats, and so they did fold down and fold up and whatnot. In the back,
still a pain to get into.
Oh, it's terrible. In the back seat, it was actually raised a little bit too. If at least it wasn't mine, and so you couldn't sit in the back because of that.
It's really small car.
They're tiny, but they're awesome. And can you imagine a little turbo one? That'd be so much fun. Okay, this is this is a nice one.
Okay, Matson was talking about the Copo program getting into other styles of racing. On Chevy's performance website, it talks about what performance cars they're building now. Mm-hmm. Some are factory, some are available for the public.
Yeah. And this is still through the Copo program.
If you have enough money and if you're a race team
and you have the connections,
you can qualify. If you're into GT3 racing, you can qualify or apply for this 2024 GT3 Corvette.
I think GT3R Corvette.
Yeah, R.
I think it's the R.
This thing's insane. So it's a Z06 mixed with a C8R, which is, I'm pretty sure, where you get the R from.
Yeah, so the current race car is the C8R, and so in the Z06 they just recently announced, this is the Frankenstein child of the two that you can just buy. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, you have to be a race team.
Yeah, they didn't say the price or anything like that. It literally says you have to send in an application for this car. But knowing the cost of a recent Copo can be up to $170K. And so
that's the Camaro.
That's the Camaro. And this is above the Camaro. So you're I wouldn't be surprised if that went for $200,000.
Yeah, it talks
Easy.
about they built it to dominate the GT3,
which is
class.
That's like equivalent, like that's Le Mans right now. That is going. They're fighting Ferraris. They're fighting Lamborghinis, Porsches. Like all the teams you think this car was supposed to fight is doing it now with this car.
That thing's insanely beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, look at the aero on this thing. It already had cool aero because that massive induction that goes to the this right here. Oh, hold up. That right there is an induction port, essentially. I'm not going to say hole because it's massive.
Yeah, they're huge.
It's just this giant vent you could stuff a child into, and it goes directly into the air intake system.
I wouldn't recommend that.
Don't stick your child into this unless it's your car, then have fun. Don't stick children in random people's cars, especially their vents. That's weird.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Don't do that at home.
Okay, so we're going to talk about... Oh, I don't know how to describe this because technically this was never produced. But they have so much money and so much advertising, and there are cars that they did make that had this in it, and it is the Rotary Motor.
Yeah, so
this... what's kind of surprising is a lot of these cars are all around the same era.
yeah, so Mazda did have a very successful...
Mazda? Oh, Mazda with their Rotary. Yes, the Yenco Rotary.
They had a very, very successful Rotary program. I got my driver's license in a Mazda Rotary truck, which I would love to find another one of those.
Little two-rotor. And then, Rotary, yes, is... Well, if you see someone say it's the Dorito, it's because the motor, like, there's no pistons in it. It's literally a triangle that just... It spins.
Yeah, it spins in a circle versus pistons up and down.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy. They're really cool.
And you can also stick... It's almost like a cylinder, but it's a rotary. You can stick them. You can stick 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, Rob Dahm, I believe is his name, is making a 4-rotor, and I think at this point just giant turbo RX-7, I believe. So that's a really good one to watch, is to see how cool these motors can be. Is his car.
Yeah, so the thought and what Chevy was pursuing is the durability of the Rotary. Supposedly it would last way longer than a piston-based motor.
And they were hoping for good gas mileage.
Yeah, good gas mileage and better efficiency.
Yeah.
They put some into some Vegas. They wanted to...
It was in 75.
No, they wanted to have the 75 Vega be a Rotary motor. So in 73, 74, they put some in a Vega and sent them to Canada to see if it could handle cold weather winters. And it worked out that the program, it never met the emission standards. If you're not familiar with the early 70s, we had a massive gas crisis shortage. And emissions were starting to come in, safety was starting to come in. You'll know 73 was the end of the steel bumper, and we started going to rubber bumpers or plastic bumpers, which really changed the look of the front end. If you look at...
I mean, look at my Vega compared to that Vega. Yeah, like that alone tells you the difference.
The Vega and the Camaro front ends were affected the most. If you look at a 73
the
Camaro,
Monza front end that we just showed, that same front end was on a later Vega.
Yeah.
So that shows you the difference between that nice steel bumper on the one that we just on the Yenco compared to... I mean, the Monza is a great car, but looks wise, the Vega front end looks way better than the Monza front end.
Yeah, and it wasn't the exact same front end because the Vega was smaller, but that style, that look,
like
the slopey, like a 75 Camaro just has a pointy nose versus the flat split bumper. So there was so many changes in the early 70s to cars that this motor, the Rotary, just couldn't hit the emissions. The gas mileage was in like the high teens versus mid 20s. you can get a Vega and get 21 to 25, 26 miles to the gallon, depending how you drove it. So this car just wasn't hitting the points that Chevy needed it to hit.
No. And so they kind of scrapped it in 75 just because it didn't it didn't work out. But there's so much advertising that they killed it for sure in 94. But 74. Yeah. Oh, anyways. And so, but they really did do their homework on this, and they put what is equivalent to over $1 billion into this program. Today's money, and just scrapped it. Like that would never happen in R&D now.
And that's so much money if you think about that they were just kept dumping money. And
so here's a comparison of the GM Rotary. I'll read them out loud. So it weighed 255 pounds, which that's light for a motor. And this thing was a 3.3. It was equal to a 3.3 liter, which is not a small motor by any means. This is comparing to the 307 V8 Chevy. Was 465 pounds, so massive. Power to weight ratio would be insane on this. But I mean, the ones that we really care about are the
horsepower.
There's cost per horsepower. What the heck? But it doesn't have the actual horsepower numbers. All right, whatever. Cost per horsepower on the Rotary is $1.80 to $2.20. I've never looked at horsepower at a cost before. This is a weird perspective, and I like it. Whereas the V8 is a $3. So I guess that kind of plays into fuel efficiency.
But it doesn't say what the horsepower was?
No, it just says parts and how long they were. It's all the physical specs and whatnot. But I mean, it's a Rotary from the 70s, so I can't imagine it had a whole ton of horsepower. The cool part about this is they got so invested into this that they were going to make a 4-rotor Corvette, and it was supposed to be a mid-engine. The original plans for the Corvette, if I remember right, so they put the front motor was basically just because every car was in the front, and so they had to the guy that originally designed the Corvette intended it to be a mid-engine car, and so they were going to do a mid-engine 4-rotor Corvette. That would have changed literally the sports car world if they would have done this.
Yeah, American-made mid-engine.
American Rotary mid-engine starting in the 70s. That literally would have changed how every car is built.
And where that would have taken it moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So this is the next one, and this is why I said the Corvair is the most versatile vehicle that Chevy's ever made.
Okay, so Chevy, looking at what Volkswagen did with the concept of the pan. You have a pan and then you have a rear engine air-cooled motor in the back. You can stick almost any body you want on it. So if you look through the Volkswagen line, 50s, 60s, 70s, you had the Beetle, then you had the Type 2.
Type 3.
With
the bus.
Yeah, the bus. Later they came out with the Thing.
The bus truck.
Yeah, one of my favorite trucks is the extra cab transporter.
Yeah, those are cool.
It's a Volkswagen bus with an extra cab built in the 60s.
So this style of platform, it hasn't gone away of just using the same driveline on the same pan. The pan is the bottom part of the car, so that's what your feet essentially go on, right? And so they actually still do Ford is doing this now with their entire new lineup. The Focus is the same, literally the exact same frame, motor, everything as the new Maverick. If you get it in the same motor type, all the way up to the new Bronco.
Yeah, so it's that's
crazy.
Very common concept.
Yeah. In Japan, they call it the skateboard. There's been, I think it was Toyota or Lexus did a proto type thing with this idea, calling it the skateboard.
Yeah, so in the early 60s, Chevy built the Corvair ramp side.
Yes, sir. So it's fantastic.
It's a pickup truck, but it was also had a drop down side, so you
Yeah.
could just put your bikes or your lawnmower.
How
or
cool is that?
small things. You couldn't put
Yeah.
a car unless
There was-
maybe like a first gen Honda car. Or something.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so that space, unlike how Volkswagen did it and made a flat deck for the pan, they dipped it. And so this dip only was 96 inches wide. So you could only, like, you could stick literally only a light, like, riding lawnmower in it. And then the backside still had a tailgate as well, so you could put stuff in it like a normal bed, but you just had this massive dip in your bed now.
Yeah, so they made 11,000 of these in 1961. The ramp was 95 inches wide and on a 22-inch incline. So
That's a pretty steep incline.
yeah, to try to push something up into that, you'd definitely be dragging.
Oh yeah, but the fact that you could get it that low and still get stuff into the bed is still pretty cool. So
yeah, so those are cool. Totally gutless.
yeah, gutless. But it's one of those. I mean, especially the Corvair, they made a wagon out of this body style. I mean, we saw the Yenco was made.
They made 2-door, 4-door wagons.
They made a ton of them, dude. There was so many different forms.
And trucks. I think they also made a van.
Yep.
You know, like a utility van.
Yeah. Okay. So this car is the example of the Copo.
The next car.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an example of knowing the codes inside of the Copo system. So this is a 75 El Camino Copo Laguna S3.
That's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. We don't, like, now that we've done this episode, we understand what that means. Up until 2 months ago, I had no idea what the Laguna model even meant.
I remember seeing them and I knew that, okay, that's different, but I didn't realize it was
So different.
part of the Copo plan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can get the Malibu Laguna Seca as well. It's a massive wagon. They're awesome. And it has the same front end, but the Laguna is basically like, oh, it's the fancy version. And so, like, this is pinky out version.
And if I remember right, they were using the Malibu body, the Lagoon, in NASCAR and other race.
Yeah, there was the Laguna wagon, but then there was also just the Laguna Seca too.
Which
So
was the 2-door Malibu.
yeah,
Customized for track.
yeah. So this is knowing body codes or knowing part codes. This is sick. It's insane looking. Like, okay, I don't know how I feel about it because, like, I love it because it's weird, but it's that front end again, dude. That's that same front end as the Monza and the Vega. It's that Laguna front end, but it is technically more aerodynamic and better for airflow. And so I'm like, oh, you don't look as good, but you're freaking cool, man. Like,
So the weird thing about this is a lot of the Copa programs, they decided how many they were going to build of that year. Like the Nova, what was it, 500?
it was like 500 or something like that. It was very limited productions based off of like whatever race they were trying to get into. They would meet production rules for that race, and that would be it.
And the Vega was 200 of each model, 50 of the wagon.
Yeah.
They don't know how many of these El Caminos were built because you could just go into the dealer if you knew the parts, the part codes, you could order it.
Literally just put them together, which is insane.
So it wasn't like a Copa program. We're going to build 500.
It was literally just knowing what to do.
500 Camaros with 396s or Novas with 396s. It was like somebody just went in, said, okay, I want X.
This is how I'm imagining this happen, is some dude in, like, I'm going to say Kansas. This feels like a Kansas car to me. And so he's sitting there and he's like, shoot, dang, El Camino just looked like El Camino again. They just made it all copoed. I wish I had. That's a fancy front end. And he's like, that's the same front end as the Laguna? It is the same front end. I'm going to be back 1 minute. It didn't. I'm assuming it definitely was not in a computer. So he's like going through his book. Laguna Seca front end code. Let me just throw this on the piece of paper, cross out the original one, and just see what happens. 6 months later, he gave birth to this.
Yeah, so they would come usually with the 350 in it. I don't think there was huge huge motor pack.
Well, I mean, it's an El Camino. Like, El Caminos are cool, for sure. But when you think muscle car, you don't think El Camino.
Yeah, the 70.
Like, you do. It's on the list, but you don't.
SS 396, that thing would move.
Yeah, but if someone says, think of a Chevy muscle car, what do you think? Chevelle, Nova, Camaro. Like, so an El Camino and a Ranchero on the Ford side, they are cool cars. They're just underrated. And so to see some random people basically broke into the Copo system and just threw a fancy front end on this thing. Like, that's cool. I love it.
And I've just always looked at the El Camino is because the frames and the motors are the same as the station wagons.
It's literally just a work truck that's slammed. Like,
so you just take a wagon, cut the back end off, and
there you go. You got yourself a truck.
Got a truck.
If you have a broken wagon and need a truck, don't try to trade it. Just cut the rear end off.
Yep. So then you have
Don't cut the rear end off. Cut the out.
Remember last week I showed you a picture of some guy that made a El Camino type thing out of a Bentley?
Yeah, dude, that was good. Did I show you the IS300 one?
No.
Some dude took a freaking IS300 and turned it into an oop. It's cool, man. It's purple.
We'll have to look at that later.
Yeah.
So, the El Camino, the Ranchero, they've always been super cool, but,
It's again,
that,
underdog car.
It's that thing between, is it a car, is it a truck, what is it? Because it doesn't have the suspension of a full-size truck. I mean, you can't, you can tow with it, but because we towed with station wagons.
You know who the El Camino Ranchero was made for? A single farmer. That was it. It literally, I mean, actually that's what the OOP program started for with Chevy I think it might have been Ford actually. It was Chevy or Ford got a letter from some lady in Australia saying, hey, because they stopped making the OOTs for like a little bit, and so she needed something. She's like, hey, I want a car I can go to church in, but I need to also be able to take my sheep down to the market. And so the OOT was born.
That's an important thing, taking sheep to the market.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how are they going to get their community service in?
Well, and,
I don't know.
Obviously it was used utilitarian in farms and things, but in cities, like growing up in San Diego, a lot of the construction supervisors would drive El Caminos because they didn't want to drive a big truck.
Do you know what the El Camino is? It's just an old Baja.
Yeah, that's true.
It's literally just a Baja.
A lot bigger, but a supervisor needed to be able to throw some 2x4s in the back of his truck.
Yeah.
You have to remember the trucks in the 70s and 80s weren't the trucks of today.
No.
You didn't have the Harley version. You didn't have the King Ranch version. You didn't have all
trucks were trucks.
Fancy versions. So
like in the 80s, you got into super trucks like Little Red and whatnot, but realistically,
they still
you didn't have a whole ton.
They still weren't luxurious.
No. I mean, look at Penny. Penny is a very clean truck, but it is literally just a truck. There is zero performance involved.
Bench seat, rubber mat, no.
Bench seat with springs, mind you. So it's just blah, 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 blah.
Nothing on the ceiling. I think there used to be something on the ceiling because there's little holes. I think it was probably like a piece of cardboard with some crushed velvet on or something.
Probably.
But there's nothing luxurious about that 78 truck. So if you were a supervisor, you didn't want to drive a big monster tank truck, so you'd get an El Camino. Because you show up to the job, you need some wood, you need some whatever.
I mean, it's a very singular purposed vehicle, is all.
Yes.
So,
so this is the last one?
This is the last one.
Coming to the end. Save the best for last.
This thing is amazing, to say the least.
Usually we try to stay away from the major, like, Challenger, Mustang, Camaro.
When you find those models, though, like, you have to talk. I mean, the KR.
Yeah.
The KR GT500, obviously we have to talk about that. The Charger, that's the one that had the H, I forgot what it is. It's that funny front end one that we love. But sometimes they make a version of that car you cannot deny.
So we like to find the different ones, like that Fairlane 500 race car.
Yeah.
I knew they made cool Fairlanes, but I didn't know about that race car program.
Yeah.
With the fiberglass hood and all that. So we're going to wrap it up with the 2014-2020 Camaro Copa.
Okay, so this model is a 2020. But they've done the Copa Camaro again since 2014, and so these are cars you've been able to buy. This is the one that's currently available. There is 50 spots available when they make a Copa, and it's a full lottery system.
Yeah.
So the chances of you getting one is insanely rare, but the chance of you having the money to now buy it is insane too.
Yeah, you have to, not only do you have to enter your name in the lotto, but you have to qualify to buy it.
Yes.
You can't win the car and then...
You have to get qualified to get into the lottery. Then you have to prove you have the funds to buy it. Then you have to wait and hope you get chose.
Yeah, because you can't...
Picked?
You can't get the winning number show up on the day your car's done and say, oh, gee, the bank didn't give me the loan.
Yeah, no. Like,
yeah, that doesn't work.
You have to have the money secured before you even are accepted to think about buying this car.
Yeah, so it's designed to race, drag race.
NHRA.
69 made each year. And I bet you that number has something to do with the 69 Camaro Copa.
Probably. It's a guess, but it would be. I mean, there's a lot of companies. I mean, look at what Ford did with the Falcon that we talked about, where they wanted to have a 396 badge on it, but they didn't want to put a 396 motor in, so they made the displacement
396.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, so they're priced from about 117 all the way up to 170, depending on what
the package. So 117, I believe, gets you a 427 naturally aspirated, and they have a standard color palette you get to choose. 170, you get a custom color palette, and it comes with a supercharged version. So
crazy car.
You go from refried beans to baked beans real quick.
Is that Boston baked beans with pork?
In this case, yeah, for sure.
Sick. So here's what this special edition looks like.
Oh, it's so good.
Insane car. Beautiful car.
It's the hood on that thing, dude.
The other thing that's super cool about Chevy's performance program is you can go, if you don't get the Copa lottery, you can go buy a rolling chassis race ready Camaro.
Yeah.
Without the motor transmission.
So you could basically make a Copa exactly how that retired Chevy race car guy did with the. I mean, he bought a Copa or the Yenco and put a 427 in it, but that is what you can do with these cars.
Yeah, you can. I don't know if that. I don't think that'd be considered a Copa Camaro. At that
no,
point,
it'd be a custom, but at the same time, you're getting basically a Copa body.
But to go just get a roller ready track ready roller, to me is crazy. I mean, that's just a cool program that Chevy puts out.
So yeah, that's the Chevy ones that we found. If you want to, there's obviously in every company, we are not even getting close to how many there actually are. So if you like this series and you want us to do more on a specific company or have a car that you have in mind, leave it in the comments. We are more than happy to focus on whatever, like really, you guys want us to tell you about any car, we will learn everything about that car that we can and teach you. What we talked about this while we were writing this episode is just how much we've learned in these 11 episodes. Not just about like special editions and whatnot like that, but just the amount of history that's in every single one of these cars is insane.
Yeah, and the history in the company. You see these cars, you're familiar with these cars, but I've never really looked into each product line, like the Fairlane or some of the custom wagons that they're building. Yeah. Well, I knew about most of Vegas.
Well, I mean, you had one, so you kind of.
That was the car.
That's kind of the tendency, though, especially for car guys, is you get a car, and then you learn everything about that car, and now you know everything. I mean, that's exactly what I did with Subarus, and so this is now making it so we're learning so much about everything, which is a lot. So, but yeah, if you guys, even if you have different automotive suggestions, I know we talked about getting the motorcycles, that is in the future.
And then also other some of the European brands doing
Yeah,
the
we'll
same
get there.
sort of thing with the European brands, or also the big three, 3.5, because we still like to include AMC.
Yeah, AMC is in the big three for us.
That's
3.5.
3.5.
Yeah.
But like the Canadian versions or the Brazilian versions or the Australian versions of the cars that these companies put out.
Yep.
Like the Ford European cars are
we've talked about plenty of them, so
totally different. So,
but yeah, so that's Chevy's, and we're grateful for you guys watching and taking the time out of the day to watch these. We enjoy making them, and so we want to keep making them for you. Please follow us on social media, which is Instagram and Facebook. Right now, we're on TikTok as well. Everything's under Coop and Hatch. And then if you have for those suggestions, if you just want to email coopandhatch@gmail.com, we'll respond to you as soon as possible. And
send in pictures of your projects for the car of the week.
Yep. Car of the week is still going. We've seen some insane ones recently. But yeah, thank you again, and we love you guys.
Have a great weekend. For my Hawaiian friends.